You know a phrase that's been thrown out a lot? There are too many games to play. For some people, it's like a funny quirk, but for others, it can be a crippling burden. I used to look at this as the biggest first world problem. How could you possibly complain? Isn't having a lot of games a good thing? Well, as I get older, I'm starting to understand why people are saying this. It really feels like just as a new game comes out, 5 new AAA games are released on the exact same day, a new indie game is taking the world by storm, and you gotta check out this cult classic. And don't forget a new trailer for an upcoming game just dropped. But are there really too many games right now? Or have we gotten too comfortable? Let's take a look at why this might feel like a problem and what we could do about it. First, I want to take it back to what gaming used to be for me, specifically a 2000s kid. I had pretty much all the hallmarks of your typical gaming childhood. I was not one of those kids that got games whenever they asked for it. I had to be a good, patient kid to earn them. I never ever went to the store and bought games by myself, so I basically had to be at the right place at the right time. If I was tagging along for a Target trip, that was my one shot to beg my parents for a new game. It didn't work most of the time, but when it did, I knew I hit the jackpot. Now, actually choosing the game, that was a different story. I usually didn't think that far ahead. I was that kid who would spend 15 to 20 minutes trying to figure out which game he actually wanted. And yes, thankfully, I got games as presents. Most times, not really the ones I wanted, but still games nonetheless. But what really kept me satisfied were the hand-me-downs, whether it was my sister's apparently valuable Pokemon games, or my beloved Wii Sports Resort I got from my cousin. I was fed. There was an underrated feedback loop of patience and reward. Sure, I had way less games compared to now, but I played every single game I owned to death, even the bad ones. Despite not having expendable income of my own, I wasn't any less happier because at the end of the day, playing games was the reward. Getting more was just a bonus. Another benefit in hindsight was that gaming was truly my own bubble and I loved it. Whatever game I wanted was purely for my own interests. No outside reactions or opinions clouding up my judgment. No one was shouting at me to buy 10 games because the Steam sale was ending soon. And I hate to say it, but most games back then had quality right out of the box. No need for day one updates. Despite being the shyest kid ever, gaming still felt like a sanctuary. I was also lucky enough to not be bullied for liking Nintendo or video games in general, which unfortunately not all kids could say. I think that's why I miss it the most. I was truly able to focus on whichever game spoke to me and nothing else. If I had one word to describe how it feels to be a video game consumer in 2023, it's overwhelming. If you cannot relate to this feeling, good for you. You're probably well adjusted and go to bed on time. But for the rest of us, God, it's brutal out here. It's extremely convenient to play games. Perhaps even a little too convenient. I'm not saying to take away access to games, like a certain eShop. I'm just saying that the gaming culture feels so saturated that you feel like you can't catch a break. There are always 5 new games releasing, a new controversy happening, this game shot up in price, so you better get it now. Sometimes it truly is information overload. What's funny is that these things have always been around since the beginning, but the online world really shoves it in your face and never truly goes away. And it moves so fast that people are already bored of something after like a week, and then move on to something else. And what does this cause? Impulsively buying games. Some people are more vocal about their shopping sprees than others, but I know everyone has a story about buying a game on a whim without actually planning to play it. With how simple it is to buy games nowadays, how could you not? New releases tend to no longer feel like an event, but rather a habit, like your daily Starbucks order. As a certified cheapskate, I'm not immune to this. This year alone, I have added 14 physical games to my collection. Have I played through all of them? Nope, not even half. And that's not counting the backlog I already have. I'll admit, my spending got out of control, at least for my standards, but overspending has to be a symptom of something else, right? It's not just, oops, I overspent, that's it. I know for me, FOMO is the biggest trigger. Like, I had wanted Pokemon Silver for over a year because its price was clowning around ever since 2021. Did I need this game right now? No. Did I eventually buy it? Yup, because for some reason I really needed to complete my Gen 2 collection. And to add insult to injury, I can't even play it until I replace the battery. I am part of the problem. I'd rather have too many games than zero games at all, but there is a moment when you realize that you just have a mess of games sitting in your room. For me, that was when I felt this immense guilt for the games I've been meaning to play, but then I'd end up freezing and overthinking my decisions, only to turn to the same few games I've been playing for months. Splatoon. It's this constant cycle of guilt and overindulgence. Either way, I feel bad for never playing games the right way, whatever that is. We can add more games all we want, but you know what we can't add? Time. So possible overspending, information overload, and a constant cycle of never feeling satisfied. What does this lead to? May I introduce you to the lovely, world-famous burnout. Yes, even your beloved hobbies can kill any sense of joy if things go unchecked. Don't get me wrong, it's not like I've personally fallen out of gaming or anything, but I'd be lying if I didn't admit that I've gotten close. So now that you've looked into my chaotic brain, if you can relate to these struggles, what can you and I do about this? Because the abundance of new games isn't slowing down anytime soon, but we can keep ourselves in check. I can't tell you how to live your life, but maybe these pointers could help. First is to cut back. Seriously, it's easy to get lost in the sauce of game collecting. I know, it can be exciting, but only if you can financially invest in it. I love looking at those opulent game collections just as much as you do, but it's not for everyone. It's certainly not for me. If you have the means, really consider sizing down your collections, selling, trading, or giving it to a friend. If you have no desire to play it or even care to have it on your shelf, that's a very clear sign that you can afford to let go of it. I personally always feel better when I finally get rid of stuff that's been weighing me down. I know I have a couple games that I wouldn't mind giving away. Anything to make my pile of games feel less like clutter. Moderation is quite underrated these days. Second is to relish in the fact that you own what you own. It might be cliche to be like, be proud of what you have, but it's true. There's nothing more empowering than saying that you've played every single game you have. That sounds like a low bar to clear, but considering people's massive libraries, most can't say that. I can't say that. Yes, you can still be excited for new releases, but I think that neglected copy of Kirby and the Forgotten Land could use some attention. Me, retro game collecting has been hit the hardest, and sometimes it can be really depressing knowing that getting games for cheap isn't common anymore, so I always need to remind myself that I'm still lucky with all the retro games I do own. These prices will not be forever. And lastly, you can take a break from games altogether. I know that sounds crazy, but sometimes I feel pressure to play something every day. Whether it's a brand new game or something from my backlog, it can wear you down, but I really don't have to play anything if I don't want to. I can literally take my time. I can also redirect my boredom into an entirely different activity. New games can feel really good in the moment, which can easily turn into an addiction real quick. It's interesting that we don't really judge people on how they overspend on games, the same way that someone would overspend on Amazon. I'm not saying that we need to shame them, we have enough of that in the world, but trust me, constantly getting new games may not be as glamorous as it seems. Look, life is difficult, it's annoying, it's exhausting, and the last thing we want is to regulate our hobby like it's some sort of sugar intake. But let's face it, you can't possibly own and play every game you want, and that should be expected. You may not be able to play them now, but who's to say you can't in the future? Maybe by then people will stop acting like Pokemon games are made of gold. Please? But to answer the original question, are there actually too many games right now? Well, the better question is, are there too many games for you to play? I find it oddly gratifying to resist the latest gaming trends that could sway me. I'm sure I'd enjoy them, but spreading myself too thin is a big no-no, especially for a hobby. I kinda have an entire backlog to take care of before I can even think about all the new games. Gaming can feel oversaturated these days, but remember, nobody can tell you what to play. It's up to you and you only. If you're like me and choose to take 1 year to beat a game, that's completely valid. If you need that constant flow of games to plow through, more power to you. Wherever you land on the spectrum, there is no correct way to play games. As long as you feel content, That's all you can really ask for. Life is too short to worry about having too many games. No game is too important to not miss. It'll still be there, I promise you. That just means you've got plenty of options whenever you're ready. Most of us play games as an escape, so you might as well make it a place where nothing else matters but you.